Good morning, everybody. It is so great to be here with you today to talk about Tim Walz. Who is Tim Walz? Before I jump into that, though, I want to give you the highlight, the vibes, the feeling when yesterday Kamala Harris and her VP pick walked on stage. Don't often get chills and I don't easily cry, but I felt this resurgence of hope because I understood that it was possible. It was possible to defeat Donald Trump once again with this ticket. I just want to play this for you to set that stage. Now, normally, when I'm celebrating somebody, I would say to you who they are. But I want to clear away a little controversy first. So, as you know, yesterday it leaked out a little bit early in the day, but it was confirmed by the campaign that Kamala Harris had selected the governor of Minnesota, Tim Walz, to be her vice president. And this was very exciting for many people, but also upsetting for some. Many people had a candidate that they may have preferred, even if they planned to stand behind whoever the ticket was. And the leading candidate, there were three final contenders. There was Tim Walz of Minnesota, Josh Shapiro of Pennsylvania, and Mark Kelly of Arizona. He is a senator. And at the end of the day, Harris decided that the right complement to her and to the ticket, in terms of personalities, in terms of skill sets, in terms of styles, and in terms of geographic diversity, turned out to be for her the governor of Minnesota, Tim Walz. And immediately, of course, there were the Republicans who would have attacked whoever Kamala Harris picked. I mean, they had a plan to do that. J.D. Vance, by the way, was in Pennsylvania the same day, this kind of like tracking her move or counter programming. And he had prepared, Fox News pointed this out this morning, I listened to them, that there were flyers already printed out complaining about how terrible Josh Shapiro was. So people were thrown for a loop and had to quickly adjust their messaging to say if they wanted to attack Tim Walz. But the biggest line of attack, which I find personally offensive as a Jewish person, was the idea that we now know Donald Trump's MAGA team was trying to plant and stir up in the media, that Harris was not going to or had not chosen Josh Shapiro to be her running mate because he was Jewish. And they were attacking her for being anti-Semitic. And there's a lot of attempts at driving wedges within the Jewish community. And I have snapped back at people on Twitter who are trying to gin that up. Often they are not Jewish. One was, in fact, Nikki Haley. And I said to her, stop doing this. I think I began my tweet with, stop it. Why are you trying to gin up anti-Semitism right now, right? Jewish people in America are not that stupid, by the way. And just in case you don't believe me that this was not the reason that she did not choose Shapiro, we have it in Shapiro's own words, first of all. So let me show you this slide. There was reporting in Politico, and this probably came out from people close to Governor Shapiro, that he, even though, and as we know this, I'm going to play a clip from him, he's been long-time friends with Kamala Harris. They're both former prosecutors. They've known each other for decades. And he did not feel like his one-on-one with her over the weekend went as well as it could have. And apparently he communicated to her the either later that day or the following day that, he really thought maybe it was best for him to stay in Philadelphia. So that's coming from Shapiro himself. In addition, Congressman Dan Goldman, who is a strong congressman from New York, who has been very clear in his support for Israel, because part of this too is the allegation that there was anti-Semitism in not choosing Shapiro because of his support for Israel, even though he doesn't like Netanyahu. Again, there's this whole thing trying to make Jewish people angry, to suppress our vote or to turn us into MAGA voters. And here's what Dan Goldman said yesterday. He looked into it, and I know you might not be able to read this statement on your phone, but you can go back or you can take a screen cap of it. And basically he said he did the work. He did his research. He was worried what his constituents were suggesting, what people in his community thought. Was it true? He wanted to look into, was it true that Kamala Harris decided not to pick Shapiro because he is Jewish? And Goldman said that is not the case. He had a long conversation with Harris and he is comfortable. And let me tell you, if Dan Goldman is comfortable, I'm comfortable. Now, let us now deal with one last thing before I get a little bit more into what happened yesterday at the campaign event. I talked to you about snapping back and the importance of dealing not with bots. When bots flood my mentions, and this has been happening a lot recently because they don't like to see us celebrating this new ticket, I just remove. Basically, I just block them after I remove their comment, hide it from the feed. I don't need people to see what I'm writing and feeling like these are real people coming after me. But when it's a real person in public eye, I will engage with them. So let me show you what happened. Immediately yesterday, when the fabulous Tim Walz was selected to be Harris's VP candidate, we have Elise Stefanik of all people, who was gunning for becoming the running mate of Donald Trump's, who has gone off the deep end MAGA, who was once considered a reasonable Republican conservative from people who know her, who is completely without morals and cravenly obsessed with her own political career. Here's what she said. She said in a tweet, and this was at around 11:51, right after the leak, Kamala Harris owns the border crisis. Again, this is Elise Stefanik, Congresswoman. Kamala Harris owns the border crisis. Tim Walz owns the defund the police riots. This is a match made in heaven for radical far left Democrats and a match made in hell for the American people. Now, I'm gonna come back to this, and I will break down why each of these things are misleading. But that's not how I handled Harris. Here was my snap back. I'm sorry, this is not how I handled Stefanik. This was my snap back. I said, give it a rest, Congresswoman. You own a boring, old, convicted felon, adjudicated sexual assaulter, congenital con artist, and his faux hillbilly sidekick. That's how I responded to her, because that's the real issue here. But let me go back for you, because you deserve a breakdown of why these allegations are unfounded and how you're going to see these as the attacks on Harris and Walz. Okay. This old trope, they're saying Kamala Harris owns the border crisis. To be clear, Kamala Harris is the vice president of the United States. Also, to be absolutely crystal clear, the Democrats had a bipartisan border bill that was supported by the Senate but could not get through the House. It is on the Republicans who did not want to manage the border crisis because they were told by Trump, who admitted it, don't fix this problem now because it's a good issue for us to get elected on. Secondly, this second comment, Tim Walz owns the defund the police riots. Okay, we're going to hear a lot about this, how there was a Black Lives Matter movement, protests in the streets in Minnesota, and you're going to see fires burning. But what people aren't going to tell you when they put these tweets up, or Fox News puts up this footage, is that it was a member of this group called, and I'm forgetting the name, something boys, Boogaloo Boys, who are a far-right, chaotic anarchist organization who set the fire to the police station. Okay, so let's be clear about that. And then finally, this last thing, that this is a far-left candidacy. Okay. Nothing could be further from the truth. This is, folks, the most unifying ticket that we have ever seen, right? When would you have both Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Joe Manchin all, all wings of the Democratic Party. I mean, Joe Manchin is so far right in the Democratic Party that he became an independent. They are both praising Tim Walz. And if you look at where his stances are on the issues by organizations who track this, and I don't have this slide, he's like right, he's like center, he's almost exactly in the middle, right? He is to the right of most Democrats on most issues. And so they're going to say these things, but we're going to really now meet Tim Walz, and you can find out really who he is. Okay, one last thing before we meet Tim Walz is I need to now show you how gracious Josh Shapiro is. And let me talk to you a little bit about the Josh Shapiro concerns, the real ones, not these ginned up anti-Semitic questions. When it came down to choosing between the governors, between Josh Shapiro and Tim Walz, one of the things that pollsters and pundits and political experts, or I should call them election experts, were talking about was the need, based on the Electoral College map, to get all those electors from Pennsylvania. And I don't have the number in my head right now, but I believe, and you guys can correct me, I believe it's 19. It's a huge number. I think it's the largest number of electors for any of the battleground states, even more than Michigan, a few more. And the common wisdom, the commonly accepted wisdom is that by having Josh Shapiro on the ticket, that would guarantee Pennsylvania. I have always disagreed with that, right? You can have Josh Shapiro fighting for the ticket. Also, there are other states besides Pennsylvania. Also, people in Pennsylvania, whether it's Philly or the suburbs or the rural areas, know how to support people other than their own governor. In fact, they love their own governor. And they might be resentful that he is leaving the state because he's done such a fantastic job. So let's listen to Shapiro when he comes on stage. He was amazing. He made it clear how much he loves being the governor of Philadelphia. And he reminds us what a damn good attack dog he is going to be for the campaign and how he is going to deliver. He is going to deliver Pennsylvania for the campaign. We can have both. We can have the best of Shapiro and we can have the best of Walz. I want you to listen to this.
We remember here in Philly what it was like when Donald Trump was our president. We remember when he was president, it was more chaos, fewer jobs, and less freedom. You see, Philly, I know y'all, we walk around with a little bit of a chip on our shoulder because we remember, right? And we remember that it was Donald Trump that ripped away the freedom of millions of American women to make decisions over their own bodies. We remember that. We remember that. We're not going back. We are not going back. You're right. Not going back.
As you can see, his energy is fantastic. He is a wonderful communicator, and I think he has a bright future. This was not the right role for him. There will be something else. I imagine he would be an amazing attorney general. I would love to see Merrick Garland replaced with someone like him. But in the meanwhile, Pennsylvanians love their governor. Okay, let's do this. Let's meet Tim Walz. I'm going to start with, before we do Harris's rundown, I'm going to show you how he can get at Donald Trump, right? We are not going back, right? Shapiro mentions what we do not want to have happen. He's not forgetting. Let's play for you the zinger, and then I'm going to break down who this man is.
Now, Donald Trump sees the world a little differently than us. First of all, he doesn't know the first thing about service. He doesn't have time for it because he's too busy serving himself. Again and again and again, Trump weakens our economy to strengthen his own hand. He mocks our laws. He sows chaos and division And that's to say nothing of his record as president. He froze in the face of the COVID crisis. He drove our economy into the ground. And make no mistake, violent crime was up under Donald Trump. That's not even counting the crimes he committed.
That's, you guys, what we would call Minnesota nice. He can wield a rhetorical knife with a smile on his face and a down-to-earth demeanor. What you saw there is Tim Walz, but there's much more to him. As you may have already heard, Tim Walz is, well, as I have told you repeatedly, he's the governor of Minnesota. He also is a former member of Congress. He ran for Congress for the first time, I believe, and now I'm going to get the date. Oh, in 2006, right before Barack Obama was elected. Prior to that, he was a civics teacher at a high school. He is married to an English teacher. And while he was a civics teacher, he was also the football coach. And one year, the football team at his high school won the state championships. More than that, if that wasn't enough public service for you, Tim Walz was also a member of the National Guard, and he was the highest ranking member of of members of Congress. He had the highest military rank, and he did that for 24 years. And let me add a little more to this. He is also, in addition, he's a dad. He and his wife have 2 children, and they had trouble conceiving. They tried for years. And disappointment after disappointment. And then they turned to IVF and eventually had their first child, Hope. That is why they gave her that name. This is who this man is. And in addition, I should say, even though he spent his life in Minnesota, he was born in a farming community in Nebraska. And he is of modest and now middle-class means. And now, of course, now that he's been in Congress and is the governor, he has access to tremendous privilege given that status. But he spent most of his life in public service, believing in the future of America, believing in teaching, and believing in serving the country. And he is also, it happens to be, not uncommon for Minnesota, he is a hunter. And he is one of those gun owners in America who believes in sensible gun laws. That is who Tim Walz is. And there's other things too. He is absolutely pro-choice. And he is now, if you can believe it, being mocked because when he was in the high school, well, there's so much that he did. He's being mocked because he was taught, he was this high school teacher, so he understood what kids need. And so he was in support of providing free lunch for every child in Minnesota, regardless of their means. Because if, you don't want to stigmatize the need to get free lunch. This was tremendous. He's also somehow being mocked for doing that, like feeding children is bad. Furthermore, he provided, I don't know if it was legislation he signed in Minnesota. But as you may know, if you are a woman or you know women, feminine products, tampons are extremely expensive. Not only that, you don't always know when you're going to get your period, and you may be in public school, in a bathroom, in between class, and suddenly have nothing. And this could be terribly embarrassing, and you don't know what to do. And he made sure there were free tampon products, I believe is what I understand. And now they're calling him Tampon Tim, as if that's a bad thing, supporting women and making things less expensive for them. Okay, now I'm going to turn to who he is so you can see the man. And first, I'm going to show you a few different clips, and we'll talk about each of them, about Kamala Harris describing who Tim Walz is. And then we're going to hear from him. And the first thing I want to play is this general introduction to who he is. Let's do this from Harris.
So, to those who know him best, To those who know him best, Tim is more than a governor. To his wife, Gwen, he is a husband. To his kids, Hope and Gus, he is a dad. To his fellow veterans, he is Sergeant Major Walz. To the people of southern Minnesota, for 12 years, he was congressman. To his former high school students, he was Mr. Walz. And to his former high school football players, he was Coach. And in 91 days, the nation will know Coach Walz by another name, Vice President of the United States.
So the applause is real. And I think what a lot of us are feeling when you see this introduction is some real issues, positive issues in gender presentation here, right? There's always a hang up in America about women in leadership. And I think this is where Harris is a great contrast with Tim Walz, right? Shapiro and Harris are like the same people. They're very similar. They're former prosecutors. They're suit wearing, buttoned up, ultra professional, very careful in their word choices, and very sort of linear and exacting in how they present their ideas. And we're going to see it from Walz soon, how he is more like a teacher. He is a coach. He reminds us of Ted Lasso, for those who love that series. He is presenting a kind of masculinity that we're all familiar with. A loving, supporting family man, a football coach who's tough and can push people to their limit, but not beyond, to victory, and someone who is not afraid to serve in the military. I mean, he combines what we know of real men in this country, not the paranoid kind of weirdos that Donald Trump wants to represent, where being accused and found liable for rape is actually considered beneficial. Think about this. Donald Trump, as we mentioned 2 days ago, did a live stream with a streamer who is affiliated with Andrew Tate, who is in jail right now, awaiting some kind of trial for overseas, as we talked about, for human trafficking, right? This is who they are about. And Tim Walz isn't that man. He is a version of masculinity, which is, he is a man in the way he, I don't want to say stereotypical ways, but I think he's cisgender. He presents himself that way. And he also, what real men who aren't threatened by women do, who are comfortable in their masculinity, is they can stand beside women and support them. And so that felt so comforting to me. And I don't mean to be overly analytical, but in watching these clips in retrospect, I can make these comments. When I'm watching them live, I'm just feeling the vibes. Okay. Now, Harris talked about him being a coach, but I want you to hear more about this man, because he is the kind of mentor that I think we all need. And I don't have a clip of this, but this morning, or maybe it was last night on TV, I just saw this clip this morning, though, of a former player, a former member of one of his football teams one year, who said he wouldn't have made it through high school if it weren't for this coach believing in him. Okay, so let's talk about the role of mentor. And this is, again, Harris. I promise you I've only got, I think, I think this might be my last Harris clip, and then we are going to have Tim talk about his own record.
And I'll say and I'll add, Tim wasn't only a role model on the football field. Around that same time, Coach Walz was approached by a student in his social studies class. The young man was one of the first openly gay students at the school and was hoping to start a gay-straight alliance. At a time when acceptance was difficult to find for LGBTQ students, Tim knew the signal that it would send to have a football coach get involved. So he signed up to be the group's faculty advisor. And as students have said, he made the school a safe place for everybody. In the high school yearbook, the students voted Coach Walz the, quote, most inspiring faculty member. And as I think everyone here can see, Tim Walz was the kind of teacher and mentor that every child in America dreams of having, and that every kid deserves. The kind of coach, because he's the kind of person who makes people feel like they belong and then inspires them to dream big. And that's the kind of vice president he will be. And that's the kind of vice president America deserves.
I hope that when you hear that, you reflect on the rare, or if you're lucky, several high school teachers or coaches who made a difference in your life. For me, that was my dance teacher, Jessica Sinclair, who just passed on. And I'm going to try to get through this without tears. I was not a great dancer. I did, some ballet and a lot of modern dance since I was like a 3-year-old child. And when I entered my my high school, and by the way, Jessica Sinclair, I went to a private school in Michigan called Kingswood Cranbrook. It's called Cranbrook now. And I was really fortunate to attend there. And I attended, since I was at the elementary school, there was like a pre-K school. I went from Brookside all the way through. And sometimes in the summers when there were summer camp programs at the school, I would take dance classes with her, and I always looked up to her. And she was a particularly talented choreographer. I think she had danced with Martha Graham at some point. And when I got into 9th grade, you could take her dance classes, but at some point you had to audition to be one of the Jessica Sinclair dancers. And the people who got into this, my friend Kendall Alway, who was, she'd come to the school as a boarder, and she'd danced like professionally in the Cincinnati Ballet. I mean, these were people whose extension, they would lift their leg up and it would go over their head. There were very talented dancers. And I wasn't that, but she found a place for anyone who loved dance. And dance class was at the very end of the day, every day after school. And I would, I knew no matter how hard classes were or how stressful this social environment was in high school, at the very end of the day, I would go to the locker room and I would get out of my school clothes and I would slip on my tights and my leotard and my parachute pants and my leg warmers or whatever the fashion was of the day. And I would head down to the dance studio. And she would begin dance class. We would lay on the floor. And it was almost like a yoga kind of meditation. And we would start there and we would dance, and there'd be some choreography we would do inside. We would do sort of improv, and she would turn that into different dances. And some of the dances were was in Michigan, to some Motown music, and others were very creative and abstract. She did some of the most amazing, amazing things. And I always felt at home there. And it's hard to describe what a difference she made in my life, even though she was not, and especially because she was not an academic instructor. Now, I want to now turn to Tim on policy, right? Because it's not just about his past, it's about our future. And here's what Tim had to say about Donald Trump and the economy, because he is tough and we need this. And what his policies are aligned with Harris's also.
Well, Donald Trump would damn sure take us backwards. Let's be clear about that. And don't believe him when he plays dumb. He knows exactly what Project 2025 will do to restrict our freedoms. To rig the economy to help the super rich. If Trump gets a chance to return, he's going to pick up exactly where he left off 4 years ago. Only this time, it will be much, much worse. Raising costs on middle-class family. He will repeal the Affordable Care Act, no doubt about it. He'll gut Social Security and Medicare. And when somebody tells you they believe him. He said he'd ban abortion across this country, and he'll do it, whether or not Congress is there or not. Donald Trump's not fighting for you or your family. He never sat at that kitchen table like the one I grew up at, wondering how we were going to pay the bills. He sat at his country club up in Mar-a-Lago, wondering how he can cut taxes for his rich friends.
That says it all right there. And we know it's true. Whatever Donald Trump says about supporting the forgotten working man, no, he is supporting himself and his cronies. And he's gone out on the campaign trail telling people that he will do that. He will cut their taxes. He's not in it for us. The more angry we are, the more destitute we are. It's irrelevant to Donald Trump. And here's something else. As I mentioned earlier, Tim and his wife needed to turn to IVF. And this is something that is part of the Project 2025 and the MAGA. It's in their sights. They want to ban IVF. And certainly, as you know, J.D. Vance wants to. He is the VP candidate. He is a VP running mate for Donald Trump. And he is the polar opposite of Tim on this. J.D. Vance criticizes people who choose not to or cannot have children. Tim Vance embraces the possibility of technology to help people conceive when they cannot. And this is what freedom is about. And so I want you to hear this on that Tim has to say about IVF. And then I got one more thing for you before we turn to the MAGA meltdown and then Crazy Town.
When my wife and I decided to have children, we spent years going through infertility treatments. And I remember praying every night for a call for good news. The pit in my stomach when the phone rang, and the agony when we heard that the treatments hadn't worked. So it wasn't by chance that when we welcomed our daughter into the world, we named her Hope. When Vice President and I talk about freedom, we mean the freedom to make your own health care decisions. And for our children to be free to go to school without worrying they'll be shot dead in their classrooms.
Reclaiming and redefining freedom is part of this campaign. He's also talked about freedom to read the books that you want to read and emphasized that whatever Republicans once stood for, which was very different from what MAGA stands for now. MAGA stands for repression, for hate, for mistrust, and for controlling women, essentially. That's the bottom line of that. Okay, again, before I turn to the meltdown in Crazy Town, I want to share this last thing with you. One of the most important reasons that Kamala Harris can trust Tim Walz and why I trust him is this. I don't want to give you a lead on this. I just want to play it, and we will talk on the other side.
In this moment, we are witnessing a full-on attack against hard-fought, hard-won freedoms and rights. Take reproductive freedom. Now think about this. Donald Trump said he wants to punish women. And as a result of his actions, today in America, 1 out of 3 women live in a state with a Trump abortion ban. 1 out of 3. Some of these bans go back to the 1800s, even before women had a right to vote. Think about that. Well, Tim and I have a message for Trump and others who want to turn back the clock on our fundamental freedoms. We're not going back. So let me say about Tim Walz, he has shown up to stand against these attacks long before he stood on the stage with me. After Roe was overturned, he was the first governor in the country to sign a new law that enshrined reproductive freedom as a fundamental right.
He has the receipts. He's not just giving pretty speeches and lulling us into a false sense of security. He went out on a limb. He literally was the first governor to protect reproductive freedom, to protect the right to choose if, when, and how to have children, to protect women from what is happening in so many states like Texas, where women are bleeding out, where they have to be taken in a helicopter to a different state so they don't die, where people have to find all kinds of ways and pay thousands of dollars if they are in a situation where they have a dangerous pregnancy or where their health is in danger and they may in the future not be able to have children, or fundamentally it's not the right time and it's their body. And I think it's absolutely weird that people want to tell women what to do with their own bodies. And especially, let me add, J.D. Vance, who wants a national abortion ban and is on the record, and I've shown you these clips, where he does not even want an exception for rape or incest. He fundamentally believes and has such little respect for women that they should be required to carry their rapist baby to term, or if they are a child, 10-year-old, 11-year-old child, that they should be forced to carry a baby to term, because having an abortion, even in the earliest weeks, when you're talking about just a matter of tissue, maybe a promise of a future life, but nothing even near it, at the point where 25% of these early pregnancies don't even survive, or maybe 25% do. It's whatever the numbers are, it's not a guarantee just because you are chemically pregnant that it will survive. He does not even want a pregnancy to be terminated in that instance. He wants to force someone to give birth to their rapist baby, even a child, to do this, because he says otherwise this is just an inconvenience to go through a pregnancy. This is the man who I can't even begin. Okay, so let's turn to the MAGA freakout. We have, of course, Donald Trump trying today to go on the news networks acting like he's so pleased that Tim Walz is a selection. But the reality is, in the middle of the night, when Donald Trump is alone by his phone, or he's alone, I don't know if he actually uses his own phone or he just calls someone up and has them run their Twitter account, and he dictates to them what should go up. But here's what he had to say, and I say Twitter, but I mean Truth Social. This is absolutely batty. He said, I mean, this is showing you it's kind of wish fulfillment. This is his fantasy. This is after Walz was selected. What are the chances that crooked Joe Biden, the worst president in the history of the U.S., whose presidency was unconstitutionally stolen from him by Kamala? By the way, it wasn't unconstitutionally stolen. There's nothing in the Constitution that dictates how parties hold their primaries or select their candidates. Anyhow, and Barack Hussein Obama, crazy Nancy Pelosi, shifty Adam Schiff, crying Chuck Schumer, and others in the lunatic left crashes the Democratic National Convention and tries to take back the nomination, beginning with challenging me to another debate. He feels that he made a historically tragic mistake by handing over the U.S. presidency, a coup, to the people in the world he most hates, and he wants it back now. Okay, I have no idea what this means at all. And I'm not sure why anyone would support a raving lunatic like this, who, as we've mentioned, is an adjudicated rapist, who has been found liable for fraud, and by the way, was convicted on, 34 felony counts, and is going to be sentenced by a judge, a criminal sentence, on September 18th. Okay, so that is Donald. We also have Ben Shapiro losing it. And again, this is my, I think I'm going to save Ben Shapiro for Crazy Town and flip this stuff around for a moment. Okay, the key thing here is the biggest freak out, the best they can do is try to divide the Democratic Party and also try to lie to independents. This is what MAGA is doing. They're trying to tell independents that Tim Walz is some kind of communist or something, which is kind of crazy given that Minnesota is one of the most successful states for businesses. There are major businesses in Minnesota. I think 3M is there. If I recall correctly, is it Target that's based there? You guys can tell me all the major businesses that are based in Minnesota. I think at one point it was Pillsbury. You'll tell me. There are major businesses in Minnesota. The state is very happy. They love their governor. Nothing is perfect in America, but this is the idea that he is a communist is insane. Okay, let me show you this. Again, I think I've mentioned this, but it's very funny. The press often accuses, and we Democrats often remark that we are sometimes in disarray, that we are disunited, that we are our own worst enemy. That is not happening now. We have here Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who is part of the Squad, the progressive group one piece of the progressive group in the House. And she says, Dems in disconcerting levels of array. And you see here below a reporter who has two screenshots, one with AOC and the other with Manchin supporting Tim Walz for president. So guys, don't believe that this is anything other than a unity ticket. And this is going to freak out the Republicans. But don't be mistaken. If you care about this election, this is head to head now. Democrats have a fighting chance. We can't just watch these rallies and feel content. We need to get out there, as Tim Walz says, and do the work. We've got like 90 days, and he said we can sleep when we're dead. We're going to do this. We are going to work hard. Okay, guys, now, it is absolutely time for Crazy Town. Crazy Town is Ben Shapiro. He, as you know, is a very conservative, unhinged commentator who I think once was the editor of the Daily Wire, and he's known for some very strange views about women. I think I'm seeing a pattern here. And let's listen to what he has to say. This is the true freakout. He gets what a good candidate Walz is.
If you go back far enough, he was a high school football coach. And don't you know, he's a teacher and a high school football. He's basically Mr. Feeney, but more athletic. He's like Ed Asner, avuncular, moderate, just one of the boys. A guy who can crack a beer and can shoot a rifle, but is also really, really in favor of gun control and transing the kids. That's basically the pitch in favor of Tim Walz. So she does this routine. these rallies are incredibly well choreographed. I will say that. They are very well choreographed. She calls for a chant, and a chant goes up. First Democratic rally I've seen for a while where people start actually cheering USA. And why are they cheering USA? Because she says, what an amazing country this is. What an incredible country where a person like me, middle-class person, or Tim Walz, middle-class person, can become the president and vice president of the United States. Now, I agree with that. But she doesn't agree with that. She believes that America is systemically racist. So does Tim Walz. Tim Walz.
Oh my goodness. You hear it. They get it. And we get it. And this is the way it's going to be. Let's do this, friends. I will see you tomorrow at 8 a.m. And remember, we of course always on Tuesday and Thursday have Nerd Avengers right here at Mary Trump Media. See ya. See you tomorrow, guys.